All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro Podcast, the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. We're going to talk today about patient education, and we're going to talk specifically about the importance of communicating with patients from their point of view and why this is such a critical part of patient education as a chiropractor. So before I get into that, I do want to just remind you guys, if you want a better chiropractic website, go to rocketchiro.com and check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. If you want some help with your SEO, with Google Ads, or if you're feeling stuck and you want some help just with the business and marketing side of practice that goes beyond this podcast, then go to Rocket Chiro and check out our services. I would love to help you if I am a good fit for what you need. So last week, I had a podcast. I did a conversation with Chris Dorsa from Denver, and he's got a large following on Instagram. And one of the things that we talked about is he had mentioned not trying to change his patient's perspective, like point of view. And I talked about that a little bit with him, and then I thought, you know what, it isn't something that I've talked about on the podcast recently, or not that I can remember. And I wanted to do an episode about this because I do think that this is really critically important for chiropractors. And I think it's a mistake that a lot of young chiropractors make. So we're going to sort of unpack this and end up at a place where we're talking about why the patient's perspective is important. And then we'll end by talking about long-term care, because there are certain people that are a really good fit for long-term chiropractic care. There's this thing, at least years ago, it used to be in the practice management circles where you would be told that everybody stays, pays, and refers. And so they sort of set this expectation for young chiropractors that everybody that comes in is going to be happy to pay you. They're happy to prepay. They're going to bring in their whole family. They're never going to leave. And there's this weird expectation that is established when you keep hearing that as a young chiropractor. And maybe that's not something that people hear anymore. Hopefully it's not, because that's not really the reality of chiropractic practice. That most chiropractic practices, at least the healthy ones, are going to have a mix of people that are using care for all kinds of different reasons, short-term, long-term. And so we're going to just talk about that a little bit, because I think that the patient education stuff sort of goes into that conversation a little bit. And so that's how we'll end this. The first thing I want to start with is I have some notes here, and I want to make sure that I kind of cover what I wanted to say, that there's a lot of different ways to explain chiropractic. And this can be maddening to certain chiropractors. I mean, if you're very, very sure about what chiropractic is and how to explain it, you feel like you have this really perfect explanation of chiropractic, and then somebody comes along who's educated and been in practice for a long time and has a successful practice, and then they explain chiropractic in a way that just makes you cringe and makes you go, oh my gosh, I don't even know what they're talking about. There's a lot of that within our profession. And obviously I can't speak for professions that I've never been in. Like, I don't know if this exists within physical therapy or medicine or dentists. I have no idea if they argue about what they actually do. But within chiropractic, there's a lot of discrepancy. There's a lot of differences from doctor to doctor in terms of how they explain chiropractic. I would just like to tell you that I think that's okay. And years ago, I wouldn't have said that. Years ago, I would have said that my perspective of chiropractic, whatever that was, whatever I would have told you that was the right one. And I don't think that this is quite as black and white. And we live in a world where we like to use the word like my truth. And oh my goodness, I could do a whole podcast about how much I hate the word my truth, because truth is truth and your perspective or your reality might be different, but truth is truth. So I'm going to get sidetracked on that. It just drives me crazy when I hear it. In the chiropractic world, we're not dealing with truth as far as like what chiropractic really is. We're dealing with perspectives, and we're dealing with how chiropractic can be utilized. And the thing that I think you need to come to grips with before you start thinking about patient education and before you start thinking about how you're going to talk to your patients, you have to come to grips with, is it okay for someone to be in your practice who doesn't know everything that you know, who doesn't understand chiropractic the way that you understand chiropractic? And is it okay for people to be in your practice who aren't using chiropractic the way that you would use it? or even using chiropractic the way you would recommend it. Now, I am not at all saying, you'll hear sometimes people say, don't let the inmates run the asylum, which I think is sort of disrespectful to patients. I don't think that's a great way to describe the doctor-patient relationship. But I'm not advocating letting patients think whatever they want and do whatever they want and just letting them run roughshod over your practice. I'm not advocating that at all. You are supposed to be in a leadership position as the practice owner, as the chiropractor. You set the parameters for how people utilize care and how they can come in and utilize your services. So there is an element of leadership and structure that you have to bring to the table. And if you're letting your patients just do whatever they want, that is going to be a practice that there's just a tremendous amount of chaos. You can't do that. With that said, what I would ask a lot of chiropractors who have sort of a my way or the highway approach is that really the hill you want to die on? Some chiropractors, the answer is yes. And what tends to happen when you have that mentality of everybody has to think the way that I think and everybody has to accept chiropractic the way that I do, everybody has to do care exactly the way that I say they should, you tend to have this mentality of some will, some won't, so what, next please. It's sort of this. And also the other problem too is we tend to not listen very well when we're in those situations. And I'm not casting stones in my glass house. I was that chiropractor. Like I was that chiropractor who, early in practice, I was taught scripts, and early in practice, I was taught philosophy. And it was like, this is how your patients they need to understand the truth about chiropractic. Like they need to understand how their body works. They need to understand. And I really saw myself as like a disciple, like an apostle, I'm like going out and spreading the good news of chiropractic. And it's just something that before you get into the patient education, you personally have to decide like what's okay and what's not okay. And if you're going to be that type of practice where everybody has to fall in line, you're going to pay the price for that. And I'm not saying you can't. You can do whatever you want. There are chiropractors who have very successful practices and they have a very much my way or the highway approach to patient education and patient management and people management and that sort of thing. I tend to think that most chiropractors don't function that way. I also tend to think that most people don't function that way, and it's probably not wise. And like I said, you can make your own decisions. You can die on that hill if you want to. But I would encourage you to accept the fact that not everybody is going to understand what you understand about your body and about chiropractic. And I would also accept the fact that not everyone is going to use chiropractic the way that you would use chiropractic. And be okay with that. Once again, if people are in the situation where the way they want to use care or the way they want to utilize the services in your practice is problematic, I used to tell patients when I would make my recommendations to them, like my approach was, they would come in, we would figure out what's going on, we'd figure out if I can help them. And when I sat down and made my recommendations, I was going to make my best recommendations. This is what would I have this person do if this person lived right next door and money was not an issue. So time and money are, I made recommendations as if time and money were not problems. Now there are a lot of people in this world where time or money are genuine problems. It's not that they don't care about their health or they don't really understand chiropractic or they don't value things. It's not that at all. There are some legitimate times where time and money are problems. But the starting point for my recommendations were always, let's assume we have the ideal situation and I'm going to make my best recommendations. What would I recommend to you if you were my brother and you lived next door? If money was never going to be an issue, time wasn't going to be an issue, how much would I see you? That was my starting point for recommendations. But I would ask people like, is this, after I gave them my recommendations for the next couple of weeks, couple months, whatever it was, is this something you can do? I want them to agree to what I'm saying here. I want to get some acknowledgement that we're on board, we're doing the same thing. And they would say yes or no. If that person said no, now we're going into the realm of non-ideal recommendations. And so I was okay with that, understanding that there were a lot of my patients who weren't following my ideal recommendations. With that said, if someone were to not follow my recommendations that I would consider ideal, and then they were to complain to me about how things are going, I would just remind them that I'm allowing them to do an alternative that is not ideal. And I would just make sure, and if they got to the point where they're really blaming my practice for the results that they're getting when they're choosing to do something different than what I recommend, like that's really where you start to say, okay, this is a problem. This disconnect between how this person wants to utilize chiropractic and how they should utilize chiropractic, this disconnect is causing a problem. At that point, I think that it's wise to figure out an alternative. Like how do we fix this? And maybe fixing it is letting that person go or referring them out because they're just not a good fit for what you do. But if a person is able to come in, and if they want to come in once a year or once every 6 months, and they're happy with what you're doing and you don't feel violated by it or, whatever, you don't personally have a problem with it, then I don't see the issue. If everybody's winning, if everybody's getting what they want, even if it's not ideal, if everybody's benefiting from the relationship, then I think the relationship should be allowed to exist. So it's sort of a underlying thought or feeling around patient management, which sort of goes along with patient communication. Now, I will say this, patient education is part of being a chiropractor. And I say that because when people come into you, they have no idea how their body works and they have no idea what you do. They just don't. And I don't think it's wise to let people just live in that world. It's very, very difficult to make good decisions as a human being when you're making those decisions out of ignorance. Now, I don't expect people to understand how their body works the way that I understand how their body works. And I don't expect them to do exactly what I would do with all the information that I have. I don't expect them to be like me exactly. But I do believe that it's my job to help educate them about how their body works, help them understand things that they don't know so that they can make the best decision for themselves. Because if they have the goal of feeling better or getting out of pain or getting back in the game or whatever their goal is, whatever their thing is, if they have that goal, but they don't fully understand the task at hand, they don't understand how their body works, they don't understand the pros and cons of what's going on and decisions that they're making, they can't properly make the best decision for themselves with the lack of information. So patient education, whether you like it or not, is part of being a chiropractor. You do not have to jam it down their throat. And you do not have to demand that they come to your side of the chasm and say, you have to understand it the way I understand it. And you have to believe what I believe. And you have to agree with what I agree. I don't think that that's wise. And what Chris and I talked about, and this is the analogy that I use, is there is this gap between chiropractor and patient. And I believe, and I have believed this for a very long time, that it's the chiropractor's job to go over to the patient's side of the gap and work on that relationship and build that relationship. It is not the chiropractor's job, and it's unwise to stand on your side of the chasm and yell over there and tell them that, chiropractors are real doctors and, that's not how your body works and, whatever it is that you're demanding that they know. So it's wise when a person that comes in to understand that every single thing that happens from a patient education standpoint in that practice should be done from the patient's perspective. This is why super generic kind of canned patient education is not very helpful and it's not very useful. That doesn't mean you can't have like a basic idea or format of conversations you want to have or topics you want to cover or things you want to explain to people, but you have to explain it from their point of view, not your point of view. Their goals should be the way that all of that information is tailored. So if someone is saying, the way you talk to a mom who's having pain after pregnancy and they're just trying to get back to feeling like themselves again and get to where they can hold their baby and carry their baby without so much pain, the way you would talk to them about chiropractic and how chiropractic benefits them is going to be different than the way you would talk to a person who comes in who's doing MMA and they hurt themselves doing their last little fight thing and whatever little match. They hurt themselves and they're recovering from it and they're trying to get back to where they can do jujitsu again and whatever. How you talk to that person about how chiropractic can help is different. Now, you could have this really generic chiropractic explanation that applies to everyone. But that is sort of like standing on your side of the chasm and standing there and saying, this is how I help you, and hoping that person comes to your side and understands your perspective. It's not good business. It's not good marketing. It's frankly, it's just not smart. You're going to lose a lot of people because they don't have the ability to get to your side of understanding. They don't have that aha moment. When you wait for people to get it, oh man, you're waiting a long time. There are plenty of times where you're just sitting around waiting going, they're going to get it. They're going to get it. They're going to get it. A lot of people don't get it. A lot of people are slow. And I don't mean slow like they're just stupid. I just mean that you're saying something. They just don't see the writing on the wall. They're not putting two and two together. They're just not. And you could hope that it happens, or you can do it for them. And you could go over there and you could explain to them, like, we're going to go ahead and get you adjusted, and it should help you move a little bit better, and you should be able to get to where you can pick up your baby. It's like, oh, we're gonna see you for a couple of weeks here because we want to get this this hip moving a little bit better and get your body to where you're more flexible. You can get in those positions you want to when you're doing jujitsu, and it doesn't hurt. Help that hip recover that you injured. So my strong encouragement to anybody listening to this podcast is that make sure that you're asking your people, what are you hoping to achieve? Like, what's a win? Like, what do they want out of their chiropractic care? And then talk to them about how chiropractic helps them within the context of what they said they want. Make it relatable. It's so unwise to not make chiropractic relatable to that person. And I know it's easier to have some sort of generic script where you're just talking to somebody and you're talking at them. You're not even talking with them. You're talking at them. This is chiropractic and this is how your body works and blah, 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 blah. And then you're not relating it to them. It's easier to do that. It's not more beneficial to your business or to the patient. So don't do it. Take the little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra effort, the little bit of a relationship you're building there. Figure out how can you benefit this person beyond making them feel better. Most people aren't really in just because they want to feel better. Like, it's not the pain itself it can be for certain people if you're in a certain amount of pain. But a lot of people put up with pain for a lot of days, for a lot of their life, and they don't do anything about it. But then they get to the point where they can't do that thing. Or they get to figure out what that thing is. And then make their care about that. And then you're going to have the opportunity to educate them not only about how you can help them with their immediate goals, but how you can help them with their long-term goals. And this is how we'll close this out, is talking about long-term care. If you let a patient just think what they want to think and do what they want to do within the context of a chiropractic practice, 99.9% of people that come in, I'm just making up a number, but 99.9% of people that come in are going to assume that chiropractic is for acute care only. As soon as the second they start feeling better, they don't need you anymore. That's what they're going to assume. Now, there are chiropractic practices that run that way, and I don't care if you want to do that. I really don't. I think chiropractic can benefit a lot of different people in a lot of different ways in a lot of different situations. And if somebody just wants to feel better for a short period of time and that's how you want to use chiropractic, I don't care. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. Do I personally think that that's the best way to use chiropractic? No, I don't. I don't think that's generally the best way to approach health, is to just constantly be putting out fires, right? It's like when something's so bad that you can't stand it anymore, then do something about it. Generally, that's not a good way to approach life. You shouldn't do maintenance on your car that way. You shouldn't do maintenance on your house. You shouldn't do relationships that way. You shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, that's just not a great approach. But some people just want to do that. But when someone comes into your practice and they don't have the foggiest idea how their body works, when you're initially explaining that to them, you should explain it within the context of what they need and what they're hoping for. But then as you start opening up their eyes and giving them more information about how their body works, not only short term, but long term, all of that should be within the context of the things that they are concerned about. You want to make sure that you don't get hurt again so easily when you're doing your jiu-jitsu and your MMA. Then you need to do this, this, and this. You could strengthen that hip. You could strengthen your back. You could, this mom that's like hurt herself, I bent over to tie my shoe and I hurt my back. Okay. Well, listen, we can help you with that for sure. But if you want to not hurt your back when you bend over to tie your shoe, which you should not have done, that's an indication that you have a crappy back. Your back is junk. You want to have a not junk back? Here's some things that we can do long term to help make it so you have to fall down a flight of stairs and then get ran over by a car before you feel like you do now. You shouldn't hurt yourself tying your shoes. Now, some people are perfectly fine having a junk back and hurting themselves when they tie their shoes. But I want them to make that decision because they understand what they're doing. Not because they assume that mom had a bad back, dad has a bad back, I got a bad back. That's an ignorant assumption. Maybe it's true. Probably not. Are there things they could do? Yeah. So let me just say this. I'll end with this. There are certain people that are likely to do long-term care. I don't think it's wise to try to force the issue. If someone is coming in with an acute problem that is a new problem, the likelihood of that person doing ongoing care is slim to none. You have somebody that wasn't hurt yesterday, they fell down today and they got hurt. They've never had this problem before. Assuming they're going to do long-term chiropractic care forever is probably putting a little too much expectation on the situation. They're probably not going to do that. Same thing with car accident patients. You have a person that got into a car accident. They weren't hurt. Now they were hurt. You help them recover. They feel fine. That's how those things go. The people who do long-term chiropractic care, who are not only likely to do it, but they benefit from it. And the people that, if they aren't doing it, these are the people you should be talking to about doing it, are people that have like chronic problems, which is for me, it was most of my patients. Like most of my patients, this issue didn't just start yesterday. You know what I mean? Like that's like me. If I were to go to a new chiropractor, I haven't found a new chiropractor in a long time. My chiropractor has been my chiropractor for 20 years now. But if I went to a new chiropractor and they were like, well, what brings you in? I was like, well, my neck hurts at times and I get headaches when I don't get adjusted. How long have you been having headaches? Oh, since college. Like, this ain't new. So part of the reason for me, beyond reaching my fullest health potential, part of the reason I go to the chiropractor is because when I don't go to the chiropractor, I get real bad headaches. I would rather get adjusted every couple months than have headaches all the time. Pretty straightforward, right? So there are people who have chronic conditions. If somebody comes in, they've had this problem before, they've had it again, they keep coming in, that's a person you should talk to about long-term care. What are some things that they can do to help either manage that pain or help strengthen their body to the point where it doesn't keep recurring so easily? That's a great conversation. Those are people that are good fits for long-term care. Identify those people, talk to those people. Don't ignore their immediate problem, but talk to them about, hey, there's an element to like, let's not let this happen again, or let's keep this from happening so easily that we could talk about. So chronic conditions, repetitive stress, athletes. I always think it's funny when people say like, every NFL team has a chiropractor, therefore you should go to the chiropractor too. Every NFL team has NFL players, all these NFL players, whatever the percentage is, they all go to the chiropractor every week. They're getting adjusted. You should too. You know why that's a dumb argument? Because NFL players are getting into a car accident like every day. Like there are certain jobs and there are certain careers, there are certain activities that just beat the absolute loving crap out of your body. When people are doing those things all the time, they're going to need more care. And it doesn't matter if they could be young, they could be strong, they could be old, they could whatever. There are certain jobs and certain things that absolutely beat the tar out of your body. Now, I know some of you guys that are like, get adjusted all the time, guys, you're going to argue that like sitting at a desk is hard too. All right. Okay. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about athletes. I'm talking about like just these careers that are just physically demanding, like very, very physically demanding. And so those people are likely to be long-term chiropractic patients. So if you have somebody come in, they have some sort of physically demanding job or hobby or whatever, that's someone that not only should you be talking to them about short-term, which you should because they're probably in because of a short-term issue, you should also be talking to them about long-term because they're going to benefit from it and they're more likely to agree to it. The last thing is going to be health nuts. That's a lot of chiropractors. The fullest health potential crowd. Don't assume everybody's a health nut. Most people aren't health nuts. Most people aren't proactive. Most people don't work out. Most people don't eat like they should. Most people don't go to bed when they should. Most people don't. People aren't health nuts. So if you want, if you're going to have a practice, if you have a bunch of health nuts that are coming in that they're just like, ooh, I read all the labels and I'm just generally a health nut. That's a person also that might very well do long-term chiropractic care. And I would say those are the three people those are the categories. So don't do patient education. I'll kind of wrap this up in a nice bow. Don't do patient education for the purpose of getting someone to be someone that they're not. That's not wise. What you should be doing patient education for is to help them better understand their body so they can make better decisions, so that you can help them with their immediate problem. And if they're a candidate for long-term care, you can introduce them to that concept and help them long-term. But that isn't everyone. And you have to be comfortable with the fact that not everybody's going to make the decision that you want them to make. Actually, I wouldn't say you have to be comfortable with it. I would say you should be comfortable with it. And if you're not, you just have to understand that you're going to be hurting your business by doing that. And you're potentially hurting the patient, because you're robbing them of the opportunity to grow into that understanding and that different way of thinking. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again for listening to the podcast. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing it with your friends. Thank you for reviews and all of that stuff. If you want a better chiropractic website, go to rocketchiro.com and check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. If you want help with SEO, you want help with Google ads, you want help with the business and marketing side of things, go check out the Rocket Chiro services. I would love to help you if I can. I'll talk to you in the next episode.